We hope that this program today will be the first in what is planned to be a series on historic churches in Spotsylvania County, Virginia. We're at Craig's Baptist Church, and we hope that you'll enjoy the program. If you're staying long enough in any part of historic Spotsylvania County, Virginia, the land will begin to speak to you. It might be a subtle whisper, such as an old road leading seemingly nowhere, or it might shout at you, such as a monument or a historical marker standing on the roadside. But long before monuments were raised and roads were laid, even before the Religious Freedom Act was passed in Virginia as part of our legislation in 1786, this ground belonged to men and women who believed something dangerous for their time. Their belief was that they answered to God alone and not to the King of England, and they wanted to worship God their way, the way that they felt they had the freedom and right to do. And we're going to learn more about this from the church historian later in the program. Thank you for joining us. No one came out here in western Spotsylvania looking for fancy buildings or tall bell towers. This church wasn't built to be admired. It was built to shelter souls during hard times. Let's go inside and find out more about Reverend Lewis Craig and his unwavering faith from the church historian Emily McManama.
Well, the history of Craig's Baptist Church is rich in faith and sharing the gospel with others. Craig's Baptist Church was started in 1767 by Lewis Craig. Lewis Craig grew up in Orange County, Virginia. He was one of several sons of Tolliver Craig, and Lewis Craig, when he was growing up, was known as somewhat of a wild young man. Around the age of 30, he was saved. He accepted Christ, and it completely changed his life. He immediately wanted to start sharing the gospel with others. At the time, there was a lot of religious persecution. We were under the Church of England, and you had to have a license to preach. But that did not stop Lewis Craig. He was arrested many times in the area. He served time in the Spotsylvania County Jail, Bowling Green Jail. He was arrested in Fredericksburg and told that he had to give up preaching. He would be let go if he gave up preaching. He refused, and he was kept in the Fredericksburg County Jail for a month. At that time, he kept preaching. He preached through the bars of the jail, and the crowds grew. And that's really what started Craig's Baptist. When he was released after a month, he started preaching here in the area in Spotsylvania at the old church site. They formed a church, and they had several hundred people coming to worship. He also was closely connected with several other Baptist ministers in the area. John Waller was one of them. He loved sharing his faith, and that is something that, even though they were persecuted, they still kept sharing and kept preaching. Lewis Craig in the 1770s decided to go to Kentucky in search of religious freedom and spreading the gospel, settling down. At the time, a lot of settlers were moving west. He wanted to have more freedom to share his faith. So Craig's Baptist, a group of 500 to 600 people from Craig's Baptist and the surrounding areas, moved out to Kentucky in the late 1770s. They ended up settling in Kentucky. They had a large group going out there, several prominent families in the area. All of Lewis Craig's family went with them. And for a time, the remaining members, we closed our doors because there weren't enough people to continue meeting. So Craig's was no longer a registered church. Within 2 years, visiting ministers had rebuilt the congregation, and there was a formal church called the Upper Spotsylvania Baptist Church that was formed at the old Craig site. Upper Spotsylvania Baptist Church grew throughout the years. There was a cabin there. Originally, that cabin was burned down around the time of the Civil War. And then after the Civil War, they rebuilt a larger cabin at the original site until the early 1900s with the rise of automobiles. At that time, the roads were too narrow to travel with automobiles, so we moved to our current location here on West Catharpin, and we built this sanctuary. It was dedicated in 1911. There's an article in the Freelance Star. There were 800 to 900 people gathered from the local churches here at this Craig Sanctuary. The visiting preacher stood on the front steps and delivered the message and the dedication of the building. And we continued to worship here throughout the years until the early 1990s, when we built added on to the church. We added on the additional Sunday school rooms, the fellowship hall, and the basement. And then in 2010, we added the building across the street. So over the years, Craig's has had a history of serving in the community and preaching the gospel, but it's such a rich history of just Lewis Craig and how he, despite all the odds, all the persecution, he kept preaching. He kept sharing his faith. He was preaching through the bars of the church. Other prominent Baptist ministers were saved because of him. One of my favorite stories is John Waller, because John Waller was known as, quite a wild young man, more wild than Lewis Craig. And he was a juror listening to the case. And Lewis Craig would get up and he would preach to the jury. And he would tell them, I'm sharing my faith. This is what I believe. I want to share with anyone who will listen. And because of that, John Waller was saved. So we have quite a history and a legacy here at Craig's of faith and of sharing the gospel with the community.
Generation after generation passed through this church, some only during Christmas, Easter, for a funeral, or baptism. Some came as children, some stayed through generations. Many of those generations lie here, close to the church, close to the faith that carried them. Old Spotsylvania surnames like Powell, Maston, Snellings, Tuning, Sullivan, Pates. Names that didn't pass through, they stayed. But that faith didn't begin easily, and faith at this church didn't begin here. Let's go have a look at the original site Emily told us about. This marker stands where the road began in 1767. It sits far from the main roads and out of most folks' memory. It doesn't shout, it's just a humble marker that remembers. It's a solid reminder purposely placed deep in the woods and in a ravine. You see, the original church was placed in this concealed spot on purpose, so the congregation could worship God their way without paying the King of England and without his permission. This is the site of the original church. As you can see, there's parts of old brick and deal stones that outline the foundation. It's a little difficult to see, probably on the video, but I'll try to give you a better shot of what it looks like. Hopefully you can see by that shot that there's part of a remains of the north wall. This appears to have probably been the entrance. And the church, I'll step it off, is looks like it was about 12 yards long. What a treat this is to find this site. When we began this episode, you will probably recall that I mentioned that if you listen long enough, the land in Spotsylvania will talk to you. I said it may begin as a whisper, such as an old wagon road seemingly leading off to nowhere, or it might shout at you, such as a historical monument or a roadside marker. Well, this episode started rather oddly as well. I got an email from a lady out of state, and she said that she had done some family research, and she was a descendant of a group that had migrated from Virginia to Kentucky with their church. And she told me it was Craig's Baptist Church, and she was looking for information on it. So I sent her what I had and went about my business. And 2 weeks later, I got another email from a different lady saying the same thing. So I sent her what information I had that I had sent the other lady, and I sort of thought to myself, this is rather odd. Then about 2 weeks after that, one of our colleagues that helps put these videos together said, you know, we should do a video on Craig's Baptist Church. Well, that sort of did it. And we reached out to the folks at Craig's, and I'd like to give them a shout out. I don't think you could find a kinder, more receptive bunch of people than the folks at Craig's. They treated us very well. They welcomed us with open arms. Have a good day.